Okay, Assalamualaikum everyone. We were discussing prior to this, how are we going to find new contracts, okay? But we saw that even in one keyword or one next code, we were able to open multiple contracts. Even if we filtered them out on basis of due dates, on basis of site visits, there's still a lot, okay? So how do we select which ones are we gonna do and which ones are we not gonna do, okay? And there are ways to do that. So we do have a preference sheet that we call, and it has different keywords that we are going to use in order to see if a contract is doable or not. Okay, so this process is basically how are we going to select a contract? Okay, you found the contract, you opened it. How are we going to select it? All right, let's get into it. We have some couple examples of the contracts open right here. Let's get into them. First of all, always see this part. So it says lightning protection repairs at CUP. Then the date offers due August 12. What did I say date offers due? Should be 6 to 7 days away, and this is far more than that, so we're good to go. Set aside should always be small business. That's good too. Then we have Boulder, Colorado. That's fine. Now, whenever you're going through a contract, do not skip the description, okay? If it's a single line, that's fine. If it's a paragraph, that's fine. Sometimes it is longer. Always read the whole thing because it gives a lot of details within it. Okay, so this one is just saying that they need this work done, lightning protection. We have an attached SOW, statement of work, and the work includes this, should be corrosion resistant, should be qualified, and all that. Okay, now we have 3 attachments here. One says AMD, as I told you, that means amendment. The other one is lightning protection repairs, a whole document, okay? And then the blank bid form. Now let's open the document that I was talking about. So we have this preference list that we use in order to select a contract and then to highlight a contract. All right. We have preference 1, we have preference 2, and we have preference number 3. Okay. So preference 1 is basically how are we going to select a contract, if a contract is doable or not, if a contract fulfills our criteria of work or not. Okay, so all those kind of details. The second preference is basically to highlight Preference 2 is required for the highlighting of the documents and other important stuff. Preference 3 is again for highlighting. So the first thing that we're going to get into is preference number 1. Okay? Because that is what decides if we can do a contract or not. Okay? Let's download that document first and then let's get into the selecting of contract. Yep, we want to start the download. Okay. So it's 99 pages. Why? Because it's a single document. Okay. Most of the times or many times there are multiple documents. So this means all the details would be within single document. All right. Other one is just an amendment. Now let me give you a few tips and tricks and how are you going to do this. Okay. So let's suppose I just found this contract. How am I going to know if I can do it or not? I am going to look for Preference 1 in the contract. How am I gonna know which document to look into? Okay, that is called a solicitation document. So all of these are solicitation documents. Basically, solicitation is a synonym for contract, but there's one specific document that we call sole doc. Okay, solicitation document, because that document has all the details in it, like the clauses, all the laws applying to this contract, all the rules and regulations, the instruction to the offers, all that important stuff that would make you understand if you can do this contract or not. All right. So how do we know which one of these is solicitation document? Let me just open another one so we can, compare both of them. Let's see if it has multiple documents. Yep, it does. Okay. So in this case and in this case, this contract has statement of work separately. They have a picture separately, and they have a wage rate separately. Okay, whereas this contract only had one document. That means all of these, if related to this contract, would be within this document. All these details, like statement of work details. If any pictures are required, those pictures in there. If there are any, Excel sheet to fill out or tables to fill out, they would be in there. So everything in one single document. Now, because this is single document, so I already know what to open. First of all, always open the amendment because that is the most recent document. Most recent document, why important? Because what if there are changes that we would want to know, right? What if they cancel the solicitation? What if they gave you a site visit date? That is why it is very important to first of all check the amendment, then go into other things. So the purpose of amendment is to incorporate revisions to this section. Instruction to offers is hereby and replaced by attached instruction for offers reference 1. Offer due date remains the same, no other changes occur. Okay? And they have changed this part. The ones that read, that means those are the details that are changed. Okay? So this was pretty clear that this is the solicitation document because that was the only document there. What if we have multiple documents and we don't know which one? So we saw a notice ID in the start that I told you is a unique ID for the contract. If you just search for this unique ID, you will have the contract. So a solicitation document can have notice ID in its name. It can have the term RFQ, okay? It can have the term sole and then the notice ID. It can have the term RFQ and then the notice ID. It can say combined synopsis and solicitation. It can say combo synopsis. So anything that refers to the actual word synopsis or solicitation, those are the sole docs. Most importantly should be notice ID and everything else. Then we have statement of work. Statement of work is clear that we are supposed to see this for the specific details. Let's take a look at this one as well to see about identifying a solicitation document. See, this one has lots of details, lots of attachments, sorry. So as I said, it could have the notice ID in it, or it could say sole and then the notice ID. See, this one is the solicitation document. This is the document that we're gonna go and look for the preference 1 in it. Okay? Specifications, as I said, the statement of work has the specific details. So here, the document statement of work is named as specifications. Then we have the drawings, maps, and again, there are SOWs. They have 2 documents that are most probably gonna have the similar details. Then the bid schedule. Bid schedule is basically like a spreadsheet or tables that they want you to fill out for the pricing. Okay? Okay, now let's get into the understanding on how to select a contract. First things first, the most important thing is the site visit and question and answer day. If you remember, I informed you that in order to do a contract to see if it is doable or not, to select a contract, we have to make sure that the contract has a site visit date if required. Okay. If it's a painting contract, if it's a roofing contract, anything like that, we need to make sure that the site visit date is available. Now, note down this stuff. Anything that we're talking about the preferences, I want you to write it down because otherwise you would forget it and that's not good because you would need to go back to the videos again and again in order to see what we were discussing about this. Okay, so it's better that you make your own notes while we're going through it. Okay, about site visit. There are two cases when the site visit is concerned. Okay, first case is when the government or the client make the site visits mandatory. Okay, in that case, they would say that the site visit is on this date and it is mandatory. Whoever does not attend the site visit is not, their proposal would not be accepted. Okay, that means if for that contract we do not go to the site visit, we are not allowed to submit the contract because it was mandatory. Oh, okay. They say that the site visit is encouraged, but you are not, you are still eligible to submit the proposal and everything. In that case, it is not mandatory, but we as KSNO have made it mandatory for our vendors to go to the site visits to understand what the work is because we discuss firm fixed price. All of these contracts are firm fixed price. When we give them the price, we're not allowed to change it at any cost. So site visits are required, so the vendor gives us a price that is accurate. That does not need to be changed at all now or later. Okay. So two cases: site visit mandated by the government or the client. Then of course we have to do it. Otherwise, our proposal will not be submitted or accepted. Second, that it is not mandatory by the government, it is encouraged, but we as KSNL make it mandatory for the vendors to go to the site visit. If they don't go to the site visit, we do not use that vendor. We use the other one that went to the site visit. Okay? That's how it is. So, site visits, two cases were talked about that. Let's suppose that we had the second case where it was not mandatory but encouraged. Since we have made it mandatory, I spoke to couple vendors, only one of them was ready to go to the site visit, others were not. They were saying we can give you a price online. Okay, so what do? We only have one vendor that's going to go to the site and give us a price. Others are saying we can just take a look at the pictures and then we can tell you how much it's going to cost. Now in this case, I would not like throw away the other vendors. I would ask them, okay, you can give me a price based on the pictures. That's great. Take quote from them as well. Why? Because then we can compare that quote with the person that actually went there, in order to negotiate it. Okay? So, but we're not gonna use the person that is giving you the quote based on the pictures and or everything, okay? So after that, let's say they gave you a quote. One was the person that did not go to the site visit, one was the person that went to the site visit. So we're gonna use quotes to compare each other, but we are always gonna use the one that went to the site visit because it is mandatory by KSNO. Now I'll just give you a real life example why we made it mandatory. So we had a contract, a furniture contract. The vendor was scheduled to go to the walkthrough, but he was not able to make it. He suddenly had a doctor's appointment he went to. It was a furniture repair contract. So what happened? that he did not go to the site visit. He gave a quote based on the pictures and the statement of work and all the specifications, and we submitted that quote. Okay. So when we submitted that quote, because it was a low amount quote, we got accepted. We were awarded that contract. Now the vendor did not go to the site initially when he gave us a quote. Okay. But once you have been awarded, you have to go there to look at everything, to purchase the supplies, make the schedules, all that. So when he went there again to take a look at the table for the final schedules and everything, he was like, this table cannot be repaired at all. It has to be replaced by a new one. So you see how that went? First, he said that it could be done at this cost. Then he went ahead. Then we got awarded the contract. And when we got awarded the contract, he refused to do it because it was unrepairable. Then we had to drop the contract. And that is a bad thing. Bad thing how that we made a commitment and then we backed off. Okay? That's why we make site visits mandatory. So then the question and answering date. Site visit dates, I told you that it has to be 3 days away from the actual site visit. Okay. And if there's a site visit registration date, that should be 3 days away from the actual day you found the contract because you need time to work on it. 3 or more days. Now we have question and answers date. Of course, when you start going through a contract, you would have questions. When the vendor goes to the site visit, he would have questions about the contract. He would want to understand everything to make sure he don't have any confusions and everything. So what if the question and answer date was already passed? In that case, what happens that you would not be able to answer the vendor's question. And again, the same problem that you did not answer their question, they were not able to understand everything, they gave you an inaccurate quote. We're back to the part where the vendor is giving you a inaccurate quote. That's gonna go bad after some time. And if you get awarded, we would need to drop the contract. So it is better to see if a question and answer date is available or not. Okay? So how are we gonna check it? First of all, sometimes in the description part here, they give you the date and time of the site visit or if it's available or not, all those details. If not, we have to download the solicitation document that we were talking about, this one. And then I'm gonna do a search here. So what I'm gonna do is Control F and I will search for site visit. Okay, you see there's only one. Okay, it is showing up. Pre-bid, pre-proposal, conference, and site visit. Scroll down. No, not the actual. So a list of individuals attending the site visit is due to the POC listed no longer than 8th of July. The list must include this, and all that. Okay. So what is this? This is the site visit registration date. Okay. Site visit registration date means that you have to tell them that you're coming with these details that they asked for by this date. If not, they would not consider you for the site visit. You would not be allowed to go there. Okay, so this is 8 July should be 3 days away from today. Today is 26th and 8 July is far. So that's fine. We're good on that. And to let you know, we do have a master spreadsheet that you have to fill in. And that is where you put in all your important dates. Like if the site visit registration date is 8 July, you will mention there that the contract, this has site visit date, this, registration date, this. Then we have the question and answers. So whenever you're searching, always scroll up a little bit, okay, to see if there's something important. For example, if I scroll up, I see that they have some important details added. Okay, so I would highlight them. whenever you're going through a contract like this, continue to highlight details while you're doing the search. Okay, that way it gets easier for you. You will not be able to, do it multiple times. Like every time you want to see something, you would go ahead and have to do a search and then be able to find it. This way you would have the highlighted part and you could always take a look at it. So if I scroll down, I see that there are other details that should be highlighted, and I have to add site visit date. So site visit registration date is 8 July. Then I see the question and answers date is 17 July. Okay, that means any questions that are to be answered should be done by 17th of July. Now I did not find the actual site visit date. For that, I have to keep scrolling so that we could see. Okay, so pre-proposal conference will be held on July 10th, 2 p.m. This building, and this is the idea of it. Okay, so we saw the registration is on 8th and the actual site visit's on July 10th. So that means they want us to inform them 2 days prior. Okay. All right, so we're done with this, but we saw that while doing the search for site visit, we already found the question and answer date. So we don't need to search for that. Now, our next keyword that we're going to search for is bonds. What are bonds? Bonds are basically surety. Okay? Surety that you are going to do the work the right way. Surety that if anything goes wrong, you would be the person or our company would be the person to mend it. Okay? So bonds are basically uh a financial security that we have to put in whatever amount that we are bidding. For example, I'm bidding on a contract and I say that our price is 80K. Okay? So now the contract said that it required a bond. What does that mean? That if a bond is required, our company needs to have that much amount in the bank as a bond or in the bank or on the bonding company. Okay. And we should have $80,000 at the start of the work. And it should be maintained by the end of the work. So in that duration, if the vendor does anything wrong, like what if they ruin something, the government could go ahead and deduct from it. Okay? They would have the surety that we have to complete the work, or they would cut that money. That is what a bond is. To make sure that you do the right work, make sure that you are amending any wrong work that you did. Then there are 3 different types of bonds: bid bond, payment bond, and performance bond. As the name says, bid bond. So that means it is a type of a bond that has to be submitted when we are like submitting our proposal. Okay. For example, this contract, if it's due on August 12th and it said that it requires a bond, I need to make sure that I inform the person submitting the contract that, hey, this contract is going to have a bond to be submitted. Okay. And it's a bid bond. So bid bond means when we are submitting the contract, we need to submit the proof of our bond with the contract, like proposal. Okay. Whereas the payment or performance bonds, they both are practically very similar. There's only a difference of the amount of, bond required in it. Otherwise, they're completely same. So payment or performance bond is what? In this bond is required when you actually start the work. Performance bond, right? So when you're actually performing the job, that's when they need the bond. They would still inform you that, hey, in the contract that, hey, we're going to need a performance or payment bond 10 days after you get awarded. Okay. So that is not to worry, because when we get awarded, we would have time to get it. But for a bid bond, you have to make sure that you put it into your checklist and make sure that you remember it, that yeah, this contract requires a bid bond. Because if we do not submit the bid bond, what's going to happen? Our contract would not be, or our proposal would not be accepted. Why? Because we have a missing document. I hope you got that. Then we have the magnitude written in front of it. If you remember, I said that we have a limit right now that we do contracts that are below 150K. Now I'll tell you the reason why. So right now we have the bonds for only 150K. Okay. So any contract that is most of the times above 50K, they need a bond. So if we only have a bond that's only 150K, so we can only do the contracts that are going to range within this, right? That is why we do contracts that are within this range, unless your superior tells you to, yeah, you can go ahead and do this contract, we'll manage the bonds afterwards. Got it? Let's search for bonds now. So first of all, I want you to write down these keywords, okay? So that you know what to look for when you are searching. So bond, I see 36. If I see the first one here, it says yes, bond is required, and it says performance and payment bonds. Let's move forward. The clause that says additional bond security. So this has to be highlighted. Prospective subcontract request for bonds. So that is not a very essential clause. Additional bond security, again, just highlight these. These do tell us that a bond is required. So all of these are within a clause. As I said, clauses are what? They are laws that are applicable. We're looking for actual where it says that we need to provide a bond. So this is the statement of work saying bonding, the work kind of bonding, and not the bond we're looking for. We'll keep going. So see, I told you that this contract would have pictures within this document because it did not add it separately. Now, we did not see anywhere that they mention that we need to submit a bid bond or payment performance bond, but we saw the clauses and this line. So that means a payment or performance bond is required. And what did I say? That those bonds are required after the award. So we do not need to worry about it. Now I search for a bond. I'm just going to search for bid so that I can see if bid bond is added. Now there's another name. There's another name for the bid bond, and that is bid guarantee. Okay. So make sure you write it down because you don't want to miss the bid bonds, because if you don't submit it, your proposal is not accepted. So nothing yet. Nothing yet. So yeah, no bid bonds required, only payment and performance bond. Okay. So site visits, we're good on that. So that contract can be done on this factor. Bonds, because those are only like payment and performance bonds, we're good. We're gonna search for magnitude just to see how big is this contract. Is it above 150K? So not always a magnitude is added. So don't worry if you don't find it, because not every contract has a magnitude. So it says 25,000 to 100,000. We're well within this range. It is less than 150K, so we're good. So this second box also ticks. We're good with that. Then we have subcontracting percentage. That is actually a very important thing subcontracting percentage is important. As you can see that we are subcontracting work. Okay, if you do not know, we do not do the work ourselves. Of course, you and I, we cannot go into the field and start painting the walls, yeah, or start repairing the roofs. The vendor does that. So how is it that we are doing only the management work? Okay, but the vendor is doing the actual field work, right? So what happens is that if we make it into a percentage, we're doing like 2% or 5%, and the vendor is doing 95% or 100% of the work. But what happens sometimes in some contracts, the client mentions that you need to do, or the prime contractor, that is us, our company should be called prime contractor, and the vendor's company is called subcontractor. Okay? So sometimes the client says that the prime contractor should have work percentage of 15% and the subcontractor can do 85%. Okay? In that case, what happens that they are implementing on us that we have to do about 15% of the work and the vendor has to do only 85% of the work. They cannot do more than that, right? So that is the problem. How are we going to do 15% work, right? We cannot go to the field. We cannot do the painting or the actual work ourselves. That is why if a subcontracting percentage is ever added, we do not do that contract because that is not possible. Unless the percentage is only 95, 5%, right? 95 to 5 ratio. Then we might be able to do it. Otherwise, it's a big no. So these two, they had cases with them. Like if the site visit is required, then it should be available. If the bonds are required, they should be less than these two. Otherwise, we skip the contract. Now, if this is added, we always skip the contract. There are no ifs and buts. So you see that subcontracting percentage is a keyword, but I'm only going to search for subcontract. Okay, and I want you to write down these keywords. Why? Because how would you remember that? What am I going to search for in order to have the good amount of, you know, details regarding that keyword? So I'm going to search for subcontract so that anything regarding that will show up. So if I search for subcontract, these are just contract clauses names. I'm going to keep going. And remember, whenever you are doing these searches, make sure that you kind of, highlight everything and every time scroll up, above, and below. No, not right now. Not these. So this is not what we're looking for. Request for bonds, not important. Small business. Still not this something that we're looking for. Listing of amount. No. So we're looking for a percentage, right? Or anything else that looks like it's important. So I already know that this is not important, but I would want you to read it. Okay? Read the last line to know if it is important or not. Because in the start, you would not be able to identify what's important and what's general or what's specific to this contract and what's just added in each and every contract. For that, you need to read all of these documents top to bottom so that you would be able to understand it. We're going to keep moving forward. So none of it says percentage, okay? So we've searched for that subcontract. What if I search for subcontracting? There's only two. Subcontracting. So while doing the search for subcontractor in subcontracting, I should be able to find anything regarding any percentages or anything else. Okay. But since I did not, that means it is not added. But I'm just gonna double search by searching for a percentage. Okay, just to see if they have added any percentage. Retention of percentage, so no. So that means the contract is doable. Why? Because they're not asking for any. Sorry about that. But they're not asking for any subcontracting requirement. Like they're not telling you how much percentage of work you can do and how much percentage of the work the vendor has to do. Got it? Now, after that, we see performance contractor, subcontractor list formula in this. So basically, it is exactly same to the subcontracting percentage. Okay. But, and I'll tell you, out of the thousands of contracts that I did or I've gone through, this was, I found it only once. So the ratio is 1,000 to 1, right? So you don't need to worry about it. All you have to do is search for it. So you saw that when we did search for subcontract or subcontracting, nothing showed up regarding the percentage or nothing showed up even regarding the formula because we were going through all of the places where it was shown, right? So what is the contractor and subcontractor list or formula? So here they told you what the percentage they're applying, right? Here they would give you a formula to calculate how much work are you doing and how much are they doing, okay? The subcontractor, I mean, would they. So we see that they added a formula asking us to calculate how much work are we doing and how much work are the subcontractors doing. So at that point, it is fine. They're just asking us to calculate it or just inform them that how much work are we doing, how much work is the vendor doing. But in this case, sometimes they mention that our preferred percentage is this. So again, that means the percentage is applied, right? So that is a difficult thing. So that means we would have to drop the contract if again they mention in the formula that this is whatever you calculate, this is what we prefer. Okay. So up till now, these were the things, these four things were the things that actually decided if you can do a contract, if you cannot do a contract. Okay. So you need to make sure that you go through all of these and you make sure that either these fulfill the criteria or they're not present. Okay, for example, the percentage should not be present in order to do that contract. Then we have insurance requirement. I hope you know what insurance is, but I'll just tell you again. So insurance is basically that we have submitted a continuous amount of money to the bank for some work or different things. Okay. And whatever kind of insurance we took, if we ever have an accident or we have an incident at work or anything, that insurance is going to cover for us. Okay. So insurance requirements mean what is the amount of insurance that this contract is asking for. Okay. So they do have requirements like they want general liability to be like 1 million. They want the automobile liability to be this much. They want the personal liability to be this much. Okay. So we need to see how much they want. Now, if I search for insurance, this is not the part where it mentions. I'm going to move forward. So no place, but still, because it is a government contract, I would need to make sure that I would need to make sure that the vendor still has it. Okay. So what happens here, there are also two cases with insurance, and I want you to make sure that you understand it, make sure you write it down. So there are two ways how insurance is required. One, where they would tell you that this is the insurance that we need, and we need this certificate of insurance with your proposal. Okay. In that case, what happens is that you need to make sure that your vendor has that specific amount of insurance. Okay. Let's suppose they had a general liability of 1 million, 500K, and all so on and on. You need to make sure that your vendor has that insurance. Okay. If they have it, you will ask them, hey, can you provide us with the certificate of insurance? That's also called COI. And if they provide you that, you can submit it with your proposal, and that's good. But let's suppose the vendor says that I don't have that much insurance. So what happens? What do? We drop that vendor. We do not drop that contract. We drop that vendor and move to the next one. Now, what is the reason? So if the insurance is required and the certificate is required with the proposal, we need to have the certificate from the vendor. And we do not have the time for a vendor to go and acquire an insurance and then submit us a insurance certificate. Okay. In that case, if a vendor does not have insurance, we skip that vendor. We move on to the next one. You can just say that, hey, I understand that you do not have the insurance, and I unfortunately have to move forward to another company because it is a must requirement. Okay. Now, the second case where they do require insurance and they have given you the amounts, but it nowhere says that you have to submit the certificate of insurance with your proposal. Okay. In this case, what happens? In this case, you can always ask the vendor, hey, do you have this much insurance? If they say yes, that's good. If they say no, that means you have to ask them couple questions that would decide if they can do this contract or not. Okay. So if a vendor says, yeah, we have insurance, that's good. That means our requirement is complete because we don't need to submit the certificate, so we're fine. The second vendor says that they do not have an insurance. What should be our response? Okay, we would ask them, are you able to get this insurance if required? Okay. What does that mean? That if we get awarded the contract, we would be given about 10 or 15 days to submit all the documents that they want from us, and that would always include the insurance certificate. Okay, so that means the insurance certificate is not required with the proposal, but afterwards after the award, during the performance. Okay, so we asked the vendor, would you be able to get the insurance when required? And they say yes, that's great. We can continue to work with that vendor because we don't need the certificate right now. And when we need it, the vendor is saying they would go ahead and get it, right? But the other vendor, third vendor, when you ask them that would you get the insurance when required, they say no. So that means that is the completely red flag. If they don't have an insurance and they're not willing to get it if required, then we do not work with that vendor because insurance is a requirement and it has to be fulfilled. If we do not fulfill the requirement, we're not eligible to be awarded. And why are we submitting the contracts to be awarded, right? So now we're good on the insurance part here because I don't see anywhere where they asked for a certificate of insurance or insurance requirement. Not having an insurance requirement does not mean that insurance is not required, okay? It always means that they do not have a specific amount. Okay, so your vendor still has to have insurance. Then we have third tiers of contracting. So what does third tier means? Third tier is basically that you as a prime contractor are first in the line. Okay. Then we have a second vendor, that is the subcontractor, and they're the second in line. The two people in a chain. What if the vendor divides their work with another subcontractor and they become the third in the line? That is called third tier subcontracting. As you can see written here, can the vendor hire another vendor? Okay. I'll just give you an example of how third tier works. So let's suppose we had a contract for transport. Okay. We have to move some furniture across a state from one city to another state or something like that. And they want us to, go ahead and like pack up the furniture and move it to an off-site location. Okay. Now the vendor we were using, they said that they can do the transport, but they do not have a storage unit where we can do the off-site or overnight storage. Okay. So what happens? Then the vendor says that I can go ahead and talk to someone else that would provide us with the storage and we can do the transport. So what are they doing? They're doing the transport part themselves, and they are subcontracting further for the storage part. Okay, so that is third tier. Now, again, this kind of clause, this clause was also like twice out of thousands of contracts. So all you got to do is search for a third tier. So sometimes why we have added this clause here, why have I added this clause here or this thing here, that so that sometimes the government says the third tier subcontracting is not allowed. That means you need to tell the vendor that, hey, you're not allowed to further divide your work with another company. You have to do it all by yourself. Okay? So that's why we need to tell them. But if it is not mentioned in the contract that it's not allowed, then we're good to go. But always ask the vendor, are you doing the work yourself or are you going to divide it with someone? Okay? For the sake of knowledge. Now, if I search for third, I only find one word or two or three. Third person, third party, third party. So nothing regarding third tier. I'll just search for third tier as well. So nothing here. That means we're good on this as well. So as I said, only the first four, they decide if you have to drop the contract. Okay. Others are important for the contract, but they do not decide if you have to drop it. Cool. We're done with the third tier as well. Then we have the limitation on subcontracting. It is a very, very, very important clause that I want you to note down and write down if you have any other questions. So let's search for limitations first, and then I'll explain what this means. So I see limitations. Limitations of unidentified work without limitation. So nothing as in limitation on subcontracting. If you remember, we did a subcontractor and subcontracting search here, and we did not see anything that says limitation on subcontracting. Okay, so it is the name of a clause. And it would be mentioned in the list of the clauses or in the detail of the clauses that this is, added. Now I'll explain what is limitation on subcontracting. So basically what happens, you can see from the name as well that it is applying a limitation on us. Okay. So what kind of limitation? I'll just state the clause to you, but I don't want you to get confused. I will tell you in the end what are we going to do about this clause. So about the clause first. According to this limitation on subcontracting clause, it says, and mostly this is applied on the construction contracts, not like cleaning or landscaping, like tree removal, not on those, on construction only. So the clause says that for construction, the prime contractor, that is us, cannot pay more than 85% to the subcontractor. Okay. What does that mean? That whatever the government is gonna award us or pay us, we cannot pay more than 85% to our subcontractor. So if the vendor is doing 100% work, we cannot pay them 85%, right? That means the vendor has to do only 85% of the work and we have to do the rest. So do you see where we're being applied a percentage under this clause, right? I'm just going to repeat the first part again. So it says that if in construction, the prime contractor has to do, no, I'll just reword it. So according to limitation on subcontracting, you cannot pay, or us, KSNL, cannot pay more than 85% of the amount paid by the government to the subcontractor. Okay, that means vendor can do 85% work only and we have to do the 15%. So that is clearly a no. But there's a second part to the clause that says if the subcontractor is not a similarly situated entity. Okay. Let me write it, not a similarly situated entity. What does this mean? So similarly situated entity would be that our company is a small business, so the vendor should be a small business as well. So if the vendor is not a small business, that means percentage applies on us. Okay? The percentage is applied on us if our subcontractor is not a company similar to ours. And what is our company? It is a small business. So if the vendor is not a small business, the percentage applies. That means we would need to drop the contract. So that was for the basis of understanding. Now, what do we do if a limitation on subcontracting clause is mentioned or applied? In that case, we need to make sure that our vendor is not is a small business. Okay? Again, I'll repeat that. If a limitation on subcontracting clause is mentioned, that means the vendor has to be a small business like our company. Otherwise, the percentage would apply and we have to drop the contract. Okay? So just know, whenever limitation on subcontracting is applied, you're not going to drop the contract. You're only going to make sure that the vendor is a small business. How do you know that? You ask the vendor, are you a small business? And other times you can just see from when you're finding the vendors that if a vendor is a small business or not. How? If it is a locally situated, like only one city company, that's fine because that means they're a small business. If the company has multiple branches all over the country, like all over the US, that is a clear identification that it's a large business because a small business cannot afford to do that. What if a company has multiple franchise but within the closer states? Okay, what if, for example, Maryland and Virginia, let's say they're like 50 minutes away from each other, and the vendor has two franchises, one in Maryland, one in Virginia. So is that a small business or is that a large business? It is still a small business because they're doing work within a minimum range. Got it? So again, I'll just I'll just tell you what are you gonna do if there's a limitation on subcontracting. Just make sure that your vendor is a small business. Anything else does not matter. So first if the site visit is not available, you drop the contract. If a question and answer date is not available, you drop the contract. Now, one more thing that I think I forgot to inform, that if a site visit date is not mentioned, but you think that a site visit is required. So it is not saying that the site visit is already passed, and neither is it saying that a site visit is scheduled. So what are you going to do? You are going to contact the point of contact for this contract. For example, this contract has Laura Lopez. for the point of contact. You're gonna email her and ask, when can we schedule a site visit? Or if it is already scheduled, what is the date and time? Okay. So don't worry if you don't find site visit at all. That means you just need to go ahead and ask. Okay. Otherwise, if no site visit available, or if it's already passed, you drop the contract. Bid bonds and payment bonds, if a bid bond is added, you need to make sure that you write it down in your checklist and inform. And if the magnitude is more than 150K and bonds are required, you drop that contract, because we only do contracts less than 150. Then we have a subcontracting percentage. If a contract says that a percentage is applied on you, you have to do this much work and the subcontractor can do this much work, we drop that contract. Same goes for this one because they both are same. Then we have insurance requirement. We need to make sure that if a certificate of insurance is required, we mark it into our checklist, so that we do not forget that a document is required for the insurance when we're working on the proposal. Then we have third tier. You only make sure that the vendor is not dividing their work further with another company. Limitation on subcontracting is present. You are going to make sure that the vendor or your subcontractor is a small business like you. I hope you got all of that. Now again, I'll just tell you what did we discuss today? That let's suppose I open 3 contracts. How am I going to decide which one am I going to work on? I would download the solicitation document, first amendment and then solicitation document. In this case, this is the solicitation document, so I will download that and then I would start searching these keywords in here. Site visit, question and answer, bonds, subcontracting, subcontract, percentage, insurance, third tier, limitations. I will search all of these and I will mark or write it down that this contract has this. Okay, can we do it? Can we not do it? Just like we did right now. Okay. So if we discuss this one that we were going through, we can do this contract because all of the things were checked. We needed payment bonds and the magnitude was less than 100K. Site visit is still available. Question and answers is available. No insurance requirement, no mention of third tier, and no limitation on subcontracting. So we're good on that. All right, I guess that will be all. And for the highlighting, we have the preference 2 and preference 3 that we will discuss later. All right, thank you.